All right, so last class we left off setting up our character's spine, neck, and legs. And now we're ready to move on to the arms. And again, I would recommend sort of referring to this cheat sheet here that'll help us start thinking about the arms and all of the different joints that we're going to need. So we're going to start here with the shoulder. So if we're looking at the bottom half of this picture, we're going to have the shoulder, which allows us to rotate the upper arm. We'll have an elbow, again, to get that elbow bend. We will plot in two additional joints here in the forearms. So those twist joints are going to give us that ability to twist the arm. In here, we'll also have a wrist joint. So obviously, it's going to allow us to control our wrist. Inside the center of the hand, we're going to have a hand joint. Now, this one's not really going to get any influence over our character model in terms of deformation, but this one's ideal for when we get into character animation, and if we need our character to hold a prop or something like that, we can actually parent things to this joint here in the center of the hand, and it'll make that prop or whatever it is follow our character's hand. We'll also have a couple cup joints, so we'll put these in sort of those media areas of your palms, and that's going to allow us to cup things or rotate our thumb inwards and the side of our pinky again, so we can grab onto things. For our fingers, we'll have a total of 4 joints. So we're going to have that knuckle there that's inside the hand, and then we'll have 2 additional knuckles or joints there inside the finger. So one inside the middle finger, and then one towards the tip. And then, just like we did with the head and the feet, we will have a tip joint that rests just outside of the fingers themselves. So we'll look at setting that up. We will eventually get in a sternum and a clavicle. So the sternum is going to allow us to paint weights to the front of the chest. So the front of the chest will maintain its rigidity. The clavicles will create a little bit of rotation there in the front of the chest, where the clavicle would be. So when we start rotating our arms up and down, we can lift the shoulders a little bit with that clavicle. And then we'll have the shoulder weight joint, and so that's going to be above our standard shoulder joint, and that one's going to allow us to maintain some rigidity on the top of the shoulder. Without that joint there, a lot of times what happens when we rotate the arm up, it kind of it collapses in on itself, and it doesn't maintain that kind of solid shape that we would expect on the shoulder. So this will just allow us to rotate our arm up and still maintain our form. So we're going to start plotting these in, and like I said, I'm going to start with the arm first, and then we'll come in and start adding the sternum, clavicle, and shoulder weight joint last. So I'm going to pull this off to the side here, but I would recommend having this handy in case you want to look for things like naming conventions and just making sure you have all the key joints in there. And I guess something else to keep in mind in terms of the fingers, so this character that I'm rigging only has 3 fingers. The process is the same, so you just repeat this process if you have additional fingers. This character is missing a ring finger, so if you did have that 4th finger, it would be the same setup. It's just you'd have a little more work to do. But let me go ahead and pull this off to the side. And for the arm, I'm going to start it in the orthographic top view. So I'm going to go to Panels, Orthographic Top. Let's make sure I'm still in the rigging submenu, and I'm under the rigging shelf tab here. And let's grab the joint tool, and I'm going to start drawing this outside of my character. I'm actually going to start drawing it behind the kid here, and then as I'm drawing this, I'm going to draw it in a straight line, and I'm going to plot out the shoulder, elbow, wrist, and hand first, and then we'll start worrying about these other joints after the fact. And then as I'm drawing these in, I am being mindful sort of where the anatomy's at. So we're only going to be able to get it approximate, and we'll fine tune this later. But as I'm plotting these in, I'm going to kind of align them with their respective piece of anatomy. So, I'm going to try to draw it, this first joint near where the shoulder would be, or in line with the shoulder, and then the elbow and so forth. So let's just start drawing these in. I'm going to left click once and put a joint in there. And again, that is kind of parallel or in line with the shoulder. Once I've plotted that in, I'm going to start holding the shift key, and as I hold shift, I'm going to left click and drag out or away from that shoulder, and this is going to be my elbow. And so I'm going to try to align that the best I can with the elbow, and then I'll let go of left click. And then still holding shift, I'm going to left click and drag out, and so I'm going to do 2 more real quick. So we'll do one here for the wrist, and then undo. Let's do Well, that's weird. Let's try that again. That's a new one. Let me reset my settings real quick. So I'm just resetting my translation settings. And then let's grab the joint tool. And I'm going to reset it real quick. And let's try that again. There it goes. I don't know what that was about. So again, I'm going to shift click and drag that out. And we'll just drag out our wrist and our hand. Once we get all those in place, we'll hit enter to finalize that chain. And then let's switch to our perspective camera. And so I'm going to yank this up. And because we drew this from the top orthographic, it draws this out on the flat grid plane there on the 0 axis. So let's start to position this. Now, I'm going to position the shoulder joint, and I'm going to ignore the rest of these joints. They're not going to line up with the rest of the arm just yet. And with the shoulder joint, I really want it right there in the center of the arm, and I want it slightly above the armpit area, so I'm going to push that forward a little bit there. And then once I get that centered to the arm, we're going to start rotating and moving things in place. Now, this is where we want to be really careful. And so before I start moving and rotating things, I want to check the settings for my translation tool and my rotation tool. So I'm going to double click on the translation tool here, or the move tool. And for the axis orientation, I'm going to do object. And then for the rotation tool, I'm going to do the same thing. So I'm going to double click on that. I'm going to reset its settings and make sure that the axis orientation for rotation is also object. And then when I rotate this, I'm going to make sure I'm only rotating it in the Y axis. I don't want to rotate it in Z or X. Sometimes we can do Z if our arm is down at an angle like this, but we do want to avoid rotating it in X. So we're going to be really careful and very deliberate about our rotation. So I'm going to come over here in the channel box. I'm going to click on the word rotate Y. And then out here in the world space, I'm going to middle mouse click and drag. And I'm going to rotate this in Y. And then as I'm rotating the shoulder joint in Y, I'm being mindful of where that elbow joint's at. And I'm trying to get it back there to favor the broad side of the joint. So in this case, it's going to be the back of the elbow. And so that's pretty close. It's just a little off. So what I like to do with these joints is I like them to align, especially in an area that bends. I like them to be on that center edge loop. So that center edge loop is right here. Right here. And so I'm going to try to align that the best I can to that center edge loop. So let's go back here and grab this. And to get it in place, we're going to translate it. Now, again, this is where we're going to be very careful or very mindful of how we're moving things. And so in order for our joints to maintain the same axis or same line here, we want to avoid moving it in any other axis other than X. So if I start to move it in Z, it'll start to create these kind of weird angles in my joints. And it's just going to, again, make strange movements if we move them in any other axis other than X. So I'm going to grab the X axis. And again, this is why it's important that we're in object mode, because now my move tool is, it matches the same angle as the joint system itself. So you can see that X, or the red arrow, is pointing at the same angle. And if I move it back here into place, we can get it aligned there to the back of the elbow. And then we're going to do the same thing now with the elbow. I'm going to go back to the rotation tool, and we're going to rotate the elbow. And as I'm rotating the elbow in the Y-axis, again, I'm looking at the wrist joint, and I want it to get aligned here in the center of the wrist itself. So let's grab rotate Y, middle mouse click and drag, and try to get that there again in the center. And that's pretty good. And then let's adjust the actual joint for the wrist itself. Now this joint should be at the base of the hand. So if you look at your hand where it rotates, it's going to be right there underneath, kind of near the palm, or again the base of the hand where it meets the arm. So right now this is probably a little too far back. And in the x-axis, I'm going to push it forward until it's right there again at the base of the arm. The next joint here, so this is the hand joint, and again this is the joint we use for parenting props to our character's hand. I would like this to be closer to the center of the hand, so I'm going to push this to the left, again only in the x-axis. Somewhere about right there, should be good. Let's turn off our kid's geometry. So we've got this arm drawn in here. Now we still need those twist joints. So again, those twist joints go in the forearm. And usually, especially if your geometry is broken up pretty well here with your edge looping, or the spacing is pretty even, I could use the edge looping on this forearm as a guideline in terms of where to plot these twist joints at. So I have a edge loop here and here, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to have my twist joint aligned with these two edge loops. So I'm going to select this arm. Let's go up here to skeleton, and under here there should be an insert joint tool. This will allow me to plot in joints with the existing ones, and they should match the same angle that everything else is already drawn at. So let's go ahead and hit insert joints, and then I'm going to left click and drag from the elbow inwards, and I'm going to plot this in and align it up again to that edge loop, and then I'll let go of left click, and then we'll left click again and draw in a second one. And again, I'll have it line up with those edge loops. Now, this isn't always the case that your edge loops have this kind of nice spacing. I mean, if we could imagine this, the lower or the forearm is broken up into thirds. If your edge loops don't line up like this, I would just use your best guess, and again, just kind of break these up so that it's split into thirds with your twist joints there. All right, so we've got those in place. And now we have a problem, and that's that because we rotated these things in place, I do have rotations in my Y values. And so again, we need all of these joints to be frozen in terms of rotation, so our rotation should always read, at least at their default position, 0. So just like with the leg, we're going to now use this as a template, and we're going to redraw this arm. Now, before I do that, again, I always like to name this just so I don't get confused later when I go in to delete the bad arm. So I'm going to call this temp arm. And then let's go up here and grab our joint tool, and we're going to point snap our joints to this arm. So again, to point snap, you hold the V key, that's V like Victor. And as I'm holding V, I'm going to left click and drag towards the shoulder, and then let go of left click. And then I'm going to left click again and drag towards the elbow and work my way all the way through the arm. And again, as I do this, the way I like to do it is I'll left click out here in the negative space and then drag towards the joint I want to snap to. I don't just try to click directly onto the joint, because sometimes it doesn't always go to the one we think it's going to go to. So I'm going to left click out here and then drag towards that twist joint, and then let go, and then click again to the twist joint 2, the wrist, and then the hand. And then to finalize this, I'll hit enter. And now we have our arm. We can come in and delete this temporary arm. Let's just grab it and delete it from the outliner. I'm going to hold the shift key and click this plus button to break down this entire hierarchy. And then let's just go through and name all these. And again, we want to be consistent with our naming convention. So this is going to be kid underscore. We've been using LT for left underscore. This is my shoulder underscore JT for joint. Oh, and do be careful. So it looks like I messed up there. Let's select that and copy it. I'm going to push the down arrow on my keyboard to go to the next joint. I'm going to hit enter and then do Control V to paste. And let's go back here and replace shoulder with elbow. I'm going to hit the down arrow again and do a Control V to paste this in. Now I'm going to have two twist joints, so this is going to be twist joint 1. So let's just go ahead and do an underscore 01, and then come back here and delete out the word shoulder, and this is going to be twist joint. I'm going to do a Control A to select that, and then a Control C to copy, and then down arrow to the next joint in the hierarchy. I'm going to hit enter to select that and do a Control V to paste, and then let's just delete out that 1 and put in a 2. So I'd recommend getting comfortable with these keyboard shortcuts because it'll make the renaming process quicker. Now you don't necessarily have to do that. You could just double click in here and name things that way. But let's come in here. This is my wrist joint. And then this is my hand. All right, so that's our arm all taken care of. Now let's move into the fingers. So I'm going to turn on my kid's geometry. Oh, you're not the kid, you're the goat. Man. Let's go to the top view. So again, the orthographic top view. I'm going to click on the joint tool, and we're going to start this pretty similar to the arm. So we're going to draw a chain of joints in a straight line, and then we will start to rotate them into place as needed. So with the fingers, we need a total of 4 joints. So again, we'll have the knuckle inside the hand, the 2 inside the finger, and then a tip joint. So let's just draw those in real quick. So I'll draw in the initial one here, and then once that's in place, I'm going to hold Shift and left click and draw out. And we'll just do 4 joints real quick and hit Enter. And then my character's hand is pretty flat from the top view, so I'm just going to, at least for this first one, I'm going to position this from the top view. And actually, before I do that, because we're going to add rotations to these joints, I might as well just right off the bat jump in here and call this a template finger, or temp finger, or temp finger. And then I'm going to take this finger and duplicate it. So let's do a Control D. And then let's take this duplicate and position it. Now, with this first knuckle, it's actually inside your hand. And so I want to put it in the base of the hand. I don't want to stick it at the base of the finger. So I'm not going to put it here. I'm going to put it just a little bit inside the hand here. And then once we get this in place, again, we want to rotate this, and we want to be very mindful of how we're rotating it. And so I'm going to only rotate this in Y. So I'm going to click the Y value there, or attribute in the channel box, and then middle mouse click and drag here in the viewport. And I'm going to rotate it until we match the angle of the finger. And then we can come in and translate the rest of these joints only in the x-axis and align them to be in the center of their respective knuckles. So I'm going to grab this one and push it down there to be in center of the center knuckle. This is going to be that fingertip knuckle, so let's take this one and push it forward a little bit there to be in the center of that one. And then this is our fingertip joint, so let's just push this in X until it's just right outside that finger joint. Now, once we get into perspective, I think these are going to be on the grid plane down below. So let's hop into perspective. I'm going to shift select both joint setups here. And then let's just yank them up. And then with this first joint here, I'm going to drag it up until it is pretty close to the top of the hand. And then I'm going to switch to the rotation tool, and now we're going to start rotating this down in Z to match the angle of the finger. So again, you want to be pretty deliberate about this so we don't accidentally add rotation to the X axis. So I'm going to click on rotate Z, and then middle mouse click and drag this down. There's not a whole lot of bend in these fingers. They're pretty flat. If you did have bend in your fingers, you would want to go down the joint chain now and then just rotate these in Z so that they match the bend of your finger. So, you know, I would go to the next one and in the Z axis, bend it down. And then for the fingertip, I might put this geometry in renderable mode so I stop selecting it. And then, yeah, you would rotate this down. But I think with the kid here, his finger's pretty flat, so I'm not going to rotate the last 2 joints in Z. And that should be good for that finger. We will want to redraw it now and rename it. So let's go ahead and turn off the kid's geometry. Let's grab the joint tool, and then I'm going to hold the V key and point snap to that first joint, and then I'm just going to do this all the way through the finger. We'll hit enter to finalize that, and then I can take that finger, that temp finger 1, and just delete it. We'll expand this joint hierarchy, and then let's start naming this. So I think this was the pinky, right? Yeah. So this is our pinky finger. So I'm going to call this kid underscore LT for left underscore the type of finger it is. So this is our pinky underscore, and this is the first joint in the hierarchy. So let's do JT underscore 01 for joint 1. Let's select that and copy it. Let's move into the next one and paste it in and name it number 2, number 3, and then with this last one here, I'm going to delete out the number and then just call it tip, like so. Let's do the next one. So I'm going to grab my template finger back here and do a Control D to duplicate it. I'm going to pull it out, and let's turn our geometry back on, and we'll line this up. So this one I'll do in perspective. So not all of your hands will be modeled completely flat so that they're easy to see from the top view. So we can also do this from perspective. And so again, I want this inside the hand a little bit, and as I'm placing this joint, I'm ignoring the rest of the finger for now. I'm just making sure that this particular joint, this is in the center of that knuckle and inside the hand. Once I get it in place, I will rotate it in Y, and we're going to rotate it in Y again until that joint matches the same angle, or that the joint system matches the angle of the finger. And then let's come in with the translation tool and start translating the rest of these joints so they line up with their corresponding knuckle. We'll grab the tip joint, we'll pull that in just a little tighter there. And then let's grab that initial joint there for this finger and rotate it down, again, only in Z. I might push it down a little bit in the Y-axis for translation. I'm going to turn on or turn off X-ray mode. I just want to see if these fingers are, or these joints are inside the finger. Now it's okay if they slightly protrude. It's not the end of the world. But I think I could probably rotate that down in Z just a little more to get those inside. That's good. Let's turn X-ray mode back on. And then we get to redraw this finger. So let's turn off our geometry. Let's grab our joint tool, and again, holding V for point snapping, I'm going to click my way through each joint and then hit enter to finalize. We'll delete that template finger, and then let's rename these joints. Now, we've already got a pinky. I'm just going to steal the naming convention from the pinky. Let's copy that. I'm going to paste it onto this finger, and this is going to be the middle finger. And then I'm going to select that and then paste it into the subsequent joints. All right, that's our middle finger. Now I'm going to do this next one real quick without really explaining it, just because it's the same process. And so that there, I just grabbed the tool and started rotating it, and it was adding rotation to X and Z at the same time. So again, you got to watch out for that. So as you're doing this, just look at the channel box to make sure your X is reading 0 as you're rotating. That's good. Let's redraw it now. And this is my index finger. All right, the last one we have is our thumb. So I've got my template finger here, and again, it's the last finger that I'm going to do, so I'm actually just going to use this template instead of duplicating it. Now the thumb has one less joint than the other fingers, so with this, I'm going to go ahead and just select this tip joint here and delete it. And then this joint here will now become our tip joint for the thumb. Let's just grab this whole thing here and let's turn our geometry back on. And let's translate this over. And so this first joint in the hierarchy, I want that to be the base of the thumb, and so I'm going to translate that in towards the base of the thumb where the thumb meets the hand, so right around in here. And again, I'm ignoring the rest of the joint chain for now. I'm just paying attention to where this particular joint lies inside the anatomy. And then once I get that in place, I will rotate it, and again, we're going to rotate it in Y until it matches the angle of the finger. And it looks like once I get that in place, I could probably push this to the left a little bit there. And then let's take this joint and push it forward to have it line up with its knuckle. And then let's grab this one and push it in to face, or to be just outside the thumb. And then we can rotate this down in Z. So I'm going to pull this up a little bit. And then in the Z axis here, let's rotate it down. I might actually push it back down a little bit. And that should be good. All right, let's redraw it now. So let's grab the joint tool. I'm going to hold the V key and I'm going to point snap to all three of those joints. We'll finalize that joint chain, and then let's go find that temp finger and delete it. We no longer need it. And then let's expand our joint system here and start to rename it. So this is thumb joint 01, 02, and tip. Now, something to keep in mind. So this kid's geometry isn't very anatomically correct if you look at the thumb. So his hand was modeled completely flat. If you hold your hand out in front of you and look at what your thumb's doing, it's at a slight angle, and it's really hard or really uncomfortable to actually have your thumb at a, completely flat like the rest of your fingers. You'd pretty much have to take your other hand and force it flat to really get it at that angle. So this isn't very realistic, and what you would probably do, and if you've modeled your character this way, you would actually want to take this joint chain, and this is when you'd probably want to do this before you redrew the finger. But what we would do is we would actually take the x-axis here, and so this might be one of the few times where you would do this, and you would actually rotate it in x, like so. Actually, let me check my rotation tool real quick. Yeah. So you'd rotate it in X, and as I'm rotating it, what I'm doing is I'm also looking at the blue arc, which is the Z-axis, and we would want that to kind of match the angle at whatever the finger is modeled at. And then if we were to grab this and look at it in component mode, you can see those Y's are pointing out. And so those Y's will usually point towards the top center parts of each respective knuckle. And so this is what you would want to do if again, your thumb was modeled maybe a little more anatomically correct and at that slight angle. But yeah, and if you do rotate this, then I'd actually have to redraw this and name those joints again just to maintain the frozen transformations. But let me undo that. So my character's hands are pretty flat. All right, there's only two more joints for the hand that we need, and that's the cup joints. Now these I'm going to do from the top view. So let's switch on over to the orthographic top, and I'm going to click the joint tool, and I'm going to stick these in the center of the palms. So again, where we get that kind of meaty areas in the palm there for your thumb and pinky. So I'm going to stick one in right around in here and hit enter, and then we'll do one more here for the thumb and hit enter. Let's switch on over to perspective. Now these joints are way down there on the grid, so let's grab those and yank them up. And I'm going to have these, if I'm looking at the side of the hand, somewhere in the middle, like so. And then I might, on an individual basis, reposition these a little bit. And I think that'll be okay. Let's go ahead and name those. And so this is my kid underscore LT for left underscore. These are cup joints, but this is my pinky cup joint. Let's copy that and then paste it into the next one. So let's call this thumb cup. All right. So we've got everything drawn and in place for the hand itself. Let's go ahead and start parenting everything together. Now, in terms of your cup joints, your pinky will need to be parented to its respective cup joint, and your thumb will need to be parented to its respective cup joint. So let's go ahead and set that up. And so again, you always want to select the child first and the parent last. So in this case, I'm going to grab the first pinky cup, or the first pinky joint, and then I'll shift select the cup joint for the pinky last, and then hit P to parent. Same thing with the thumb. I'm going to grab the first thumb joint and then shift select the thumb cup joint last. And then with both of those things selected, I'll hit P to parent. Any finger that's not your pinky or your thumb gets parented to the hand joint. So again, I have fewer fingers than normal. So typically you would have one additional finger in most cases, but just know that any finger that's not the thumb or the pinky gets parented to this hand joint. I'm going to select the first joint in each of those hierarchies. So I'm going to select the middle joint one, and I'll shift select the index joint one. And then with both of those selected, I will shift select the hand joint there in the center, and then we'll hit P to parent. And then the cup joints get parented to the wrist. So I'm going to shift select both cup joints, and then with both of those selected, I will shift select the wrist joint last, and then hit P to parent. And so that's my hand all set up. Now, there are a couple things we want to check here, and that's the local rotation axis of my cup joints. So I should be able to grab the cup joint, and the x-axis we would rotate it inwards for that nice kind of cupping motion. So let's take a look here. And these by default are actually not bad. So when we drew those joints in just by clicking once and hitting enter, what that does is they just take on the world axis or the world space rotation axis. And since my character's hand is pretty flat, that's actually not bad. Let's take a look again. Yes, I don't think I'd want to change that one at all. We might come in and just tweak this one a little bit. So I'm going to grab the one here for the thumb cup. I'm going to switch on over to component mode, and again make sure the question mark is turned on. And I'm going to grab this local rotation axis here, and I'm going to rotate it in Y to change the angle of X. So as I rotate it in Y, I'm going to look at the X axis here, and what I really want is this X axis to sort of match this diagonal of the hand itself. So if I can imagine a line drawing straight out from here, it's going to match that slight angle of the hand. And that should be good. So we only had to tweak that a little bit. Let's go back to object mode. Yeah. Honestly, I probably could have left it the way it is before. This way it's just slightly more accurate, but it was still pretty good the way it was. So that's the arm. Let's go ahead and finish this up by plotting in the sternum, the clavicle, and that shoulder weight joint. Now these I'm going to do from the front orthographic camera. So I'm going to go to Panels, Orthographic Front. And then let's come up here and grab the joint tool. For the sternum, I want to snap it to the center axis on the grid. So I'm going to hold the X key, that's X like X-ray. I'm going to left click and drag towards the center of the chest. And once I get that on the center axis, I'll go ahead and let go of click and X and hit enter to finalize that joint. Let's come in here now and click on the joint tool, and let's draw one more in here for the clavicle. And so this is going to be where that inner part of the clavicle bone's at there in your chest. So I'm going to plot that in somewhere right around in there, and we'll hit enter. And then for the shoulder weight joint, I want it to be above the regular shoulder joint right there to favor sort of the top of the shoulder. So it's going to be somewhere right around up here. And I'll go ahead and hit enter, and we'll finalize that. Let's switch back over to our perspective camera, and then let's start translating these back into the body. Now for the shoulder weight joint, I want it to be kind of similar to the shoulder joint in that it's in the center of the arm. So if we look at it from the top there, it's kind of centered there. The sternum, I want it to be in the front of the chest. And again, this is what's going to allow us to paint skin weights to maintain rigidity in the upper body, or the upper chest. I do want to make sure it's inside the body there. And then the clavicle will also bring a little forward here, again, towards the front of the chest. Maybe not as far forward as the sternum. And then I'm going to turn off X-ray real quick just to make sure those joints are inside the body. That's good. And then I'm going to turn off the geometry here. Let's go ahead and name these joints. So this is our sternum. So this is kid underscore sternum underscore JT for joint. Let's see. This next one is going to be kid underscore LT for left underscore clavicle joint. And then this is our shoulder weight joint. I'm going to go ahead and just copy this name from the shoulder. And I'm going to paste that in and call this shoulder weight joint. And that should be good. We'll want to start parenting all this together now. So for the shoulder here, I'm going to select it. I'll shift select the shoulder weight joint last and then hit P to parent. And then I need the shoulder weight joint to follow the clavicle. So let's grab the shoulder weight joint first, shift select the clavicle, and then hit P to parent. And then before we do anything else, let's go ahead and mirror this arm over before we parent it to the sternum. So I'm going to grab this shoulder weight joint, or not shoulder weight joint, the clavicle rather. And with that selected, let's go up here to skeleton, and let's do mirror joints. Click on the options box. Let's go to edit and reset the settings. And so mirror across, we're going to do Y to Z. Behavior, or mirror function, we're going to leave at behavior. And then we're going to search for LT and replace with RT. And hit mirror. That should mirror that over. And then I just want to check these real quick. So I'm going to shift select both clavicles, and let's come up here to the component mode. Now you'll notice because we mirrored these over using behavior, the Y's are flipped. So I guess it's the right arm, it's our left, but the character's right. The Y's are pointing down, whereas the other arm they're pointing up. That's fine, we'll ignore that. I do want to make sure that the X's are pointing in the right direction. And so that should be fine. Let's go back here. And once we get that all mirrored over and ready to go, let's shift select both clavicles. I'll shift select the sternum last and hit P to parent. And then we need the sternum to follow the highest spine joint. So again, your spine joint count might be different than mine. You'll just want to figure out which one is your highest spine joint. If you're not sure, just select your joints over here. So that's spine joint 5, and then the next one's my neck. So I know it's going to be this one. Let's go ahead and select the sternum first, shift select that spine joint last, and then hit P to parent. And that's our kid all ready to go. There's one last thing we need to do with the kid, and that's the jaw, but we'll save that for later. I'm going to check the display layer over here to make sure that toggles off and on. Okay. And so we just made sort of a milestone in terms of the rigging process. We did the arm. Let's go ahead and do an incremental save. File, save scene as, and let's do this as version 4. All right, now let's look at Goatman. All right, so Goatman's geometry is a bit different. So this is going to be if your arm's at an angle or an A-frame pose. And the process, it does start out pretty similar in that I am going to, from the top camera or orthographic view, we are going to draw out a chain of joints in a straight line, and then we're going to rotate them into place. So let's switch over to that top orthographic camera. Now with this one, because his arm is at an angle, I don't really have the ability to kind of gauge or judge, if these joints are going to be with the correct distance from one another. We're just going to plot them in real quick and we'll fix it later. So I'm going to grab the joint tool and I'm going to go ahead and left click once, and we'll put one in here near-ish to the arm, and then I'm going to hold shift and click out. One for the elbow, one for the wrist, and one for the hand. Once we get that in place, I'll hit enter to finalize the joint chain. And then let's go to the perspective camera. Let's grab this arm and translate it up. And again, I'm going to ignore the rest of the joint chain. I'm only looking at the shoulder joint for right now. And I want to get this joint in the center of the arm, somewhere above the armpit. So somewhere right about there. Should be good. I might pull it just slightly forward. And now we're going to start rotating this into place, and I'm going to try to avoid, again, same with the kid rig, I'm going to avoid rotating this in X. I'm only going to rotate it down in Z and backwards or forwards, so hopefully we're only going forwards, but I will create bends using the Y-axis. So let's grab the rotate Z first, and I'm going to rotate it down in Z. And as I'm doing this, I'm looking at the elbow joint and this bone here, and I'm trying to get this to line up the best I can with the center of the elbow. Now that joint's still off, so once I get that mostly rotated into place, I can grab that elbow joint and then hit W on my keyboard. Will bring up the move tool, and again, only in the X axis I'm going to translate this. And again, make sure you're in object mode for your translation tool. And let's push that down in X until it aligns there with the elbow. All right, once we get that in place, we're going to bring up the rotation tool again. And this time I'm going to rotate the arm forward in Y. And as I'm rotating it in Y, I'm watching what the wrist is doing, and I'm trying to get that wrist joint again in the center of the arm. Like that. And then let's translate that joint so it's actually at the wrist. So let's take this and push it in X only. And that's going to be, again, somewhere around there at the base of the hand where it meets the wrist. And then I'm going to rotate this joint. I think I'm going to do it in Z here, just so that that joint there is in the center of the hand. And then I'm going to translate that hand joint to be a little closer to the center of the hand itself. And that should be good. Let's hide the geometry. And the next thing we'll do now is plot in those twist joints. And so we actually might need the geometry again so we can see it. So again, Goatman's geometry isn't quite, it's not broken up quite as evenly in terms of the spacing there on the edge loops. So it's not really split into thirds, and so I just kind of have to use my best guess when I'm drawing these in. So I'm going to come up here to skeleton. I'm going to do the insert joint tool. I'm going to left click and drag from the elbow inwards. And we're going to drag that in and again just try to break this arm up into thirds. And then let's click again and we'll draw in a second twist joint. So somewhere right about in there. Probably go just a little further with that. And that should be good. All right, and now we get to redraw this arm and name everything. So let's grab this joint here for the top of the hierarchy, and I'm going to name it first. Again, so I don't get confused later, I'll call it temp arm. And then let's grab our joint tool. I'm going to hold V, and we'll point snap to that first shoulder joint, and then continue to hold V, and then left click and drag another one towards the elbow. Twist joint 1, 2, the wrist, and the hand. Once those are all in place, I'll hit enter to finalize this joint chain. And then let's take that temporary arm and delete it. And then let's name everything. So this is going to be GM for Goatman underscore LT for left. All right, and let's see. So this is our left shoulder joint. Let's copy that, paste it into the next one, and delete out shoulder, and we'll put in elbow. This is our twist joint 1, so I'm going to do O1 here at the end, delete out shoulder, and we'll type in twist. Let's copy that, paste it into the next one, and that'll be O2. This is our wrist, so let's delete out that O1 and call this wrist. I'm going to copy that and paste it into the next one, and this will be our hand. Alright, so that's all named and ready to go. I do want to check the rotation axis of the shoulder, the elbow, and the wrist real quick before I move any further. So I'm going to turn on the geometry, and I'm going to grab that shoulder joint, and I should be able to rotate this in Z, and what that's going to do is give me a up and down movement, and I just want to make sure it rotates up and down sort of straight and away from the body. So that looks okay. Let me check the elbow now. So the elbow, I should be able to rotate it in Y, and that's going to give me that bend inwards, and that's pretty close. But I think it's just slightly angled, so I want to fix that. And then if I look at the wrist here, let's take a look here. It looks like the Z and the Y are flipped, and I'm gonna want to fix that. So the Y should actually do sort of a side-to-side motion if we're waving, and then the Z should control the sort of hand flap motion. So if we were to actually go back and look at the kid rig real quick, and grab the kid's wrist here, you'll notice the Y-axis is giving that side-to-side motion like this, and then the Z-axis gives us that kind of flap up and down. And so we're going to want to have that same type of rotation in the wrist back there. And then again, if we look at the elbow, it's the Y-axis that's giving us that bend in the elbow. And so I want to maintain that consistency with my other rig. So let's come over here and turn the geometry back on. I'm going to grab the elbow first. And this one's pretty close. But I feel like we can get just a little closer here. And so I'm going to grab the elbow joint. And if you look at the Y-axis, I want the Y to point out the side of the arm, and then I want the Z to point out towards that center of the crease of the arm. So that little pocket there. So I'm going to take the X-axis and rotate it to the right just a little bit, until that Z is kind of pointing outwards towards that little pocket there in the center of the crease, and that Y is going out towards the side of the arm. And then that should give me a little bit more of a natural rotation. I can switch back to object mode and test that out. And I think that feels a little better. So that one's good. Let's go down to the wrist now and correct it. So I'm going to grab that wrist and let's go into component mode. I'm going to grab its local rotation axis. And again, I want the Y to point out towards the top of the hand, and then I want the Z to face to the left. So I'm going to take the X-axis and rotate it. And again, if you look at that Y, it's pointing up towards the top of the wrist or the hand. And then that Z is pointing to the left, and it's going at the same angle as the hand itself. And let's go back to object mode and take a look. So I should be able to grab this now. And if I rotate it in Z, I get that flapping motion, and it flaps sort of the angle the hand is modeled in. So that's good. And then the Y should give me that side to side. Cool. So that's all good to go. Let's move on to our fingers. So just go to the top view. Let me draw in a joint chain here. So again, we're going to do this the same way we did the kid. So I'm going to click in the first one. I'm going to hold shift and then drag away from this, and we'll do a total of 4 of these. Hit enter. And it's all the way down here. So let's pull this up. Now, a really quick way to get this to your geometry, especially if your geometry is not modeled flat or in a T-pose, I could quickly snap this to a vertice in the hand somewhere. So I'm going to hold the V key and left click and drag from the center there of my manipulator. So again, you'll notice if I don't hold V, it's a box. If I hold V, it's a circle. If I left click and drag from that circle to the joint that I want to, or the vertice that I want, it'll snap it to it. And then let's start to rotate this in place. And so I'm going to rotate this in the x-axis first. So I know with most of these joints we've been avoiding using the x-axis, but I'm going to rotate it in x first. And then as I rotate it in x, what I'm looking at is the z-axis. So as I'm rotating in x, I'm watching that z, and I want this arc to kind of match the same angle as the finger I'm trying to match to. So let's just rotate that. And then we could rotate it in Z now. So I'm going to left click on Z and rotate it down. And I might need to rotate it in Y again. And then let's rotate it in X like so. All right, and then let's start positioning this to be a little closer to the actual knuckle we need. So I'm going to take that first joint and I'm going to push it down and inside the hand there. That way it's just inside the center of that knuckle. Let's grab the next one now, and I'm going to only translate it in X and try to match it up here to the center of that next knuckle. And let's grab this one here and again translate it in X and push it back there to be inside its respective knuckle. And then let's grab this one and push it back just outside the finger there for our fingertip. And then I'm going to go back to the initial joint here, and we're going to start correcting this a little bit more in the rotation. So I'm going to grab the Y and rotate it there just to match that angle a little better. I'm going to translate it over in Z. And then these fingers do have a little bit of a curl to them, so we could curl these in on the Z-axis. Just a little bit. And then I'm going to turn off X-ray mode and make sure that joint, or those joints, are mostly inside the finger. And that should be good. Let's actually go to component mode real quick. And so, because we rotated that in X the way we did, we were being very mindful of where the other axes were going as we were rotating them. What we should see here in component mode with their local rotation axis for each of those joints, if you'll notice there, the Y-axis is pointing out, or I guess towards the top of the hand, and it's going through the center of each knuckle. So if you notice there, that Y-axis for this knuckle is pointing towards the center of its respective knuckle, and each one of these corresponding joints here, or subsequent joints, are doing the same thing. Your Z's are all matching sort of the angle of the finger, so you'll notice these edge loops are at a slight angle, and that Z is pointing to the left and at that same angle as the edge loop itself. So they're just going outside the side of the fingers. And so that should be good. I just wanted to check that to make sure it was okay. I'm going to leave this finger where it's at, and I'm going to duplicate this finger, and I'm going to translate the duplicate over. I might even point snap it here to a vertex, and then translate it into place the rest of the way. And then I'm going to ignore this finger for now. We'll come back to it later. I might rotate it here a little bit in Y. And then let's come back to this finger and redraw it. So let's turn off our geometry. I'm going to grab my joint tool, and I guess before I do this, let's name this. So I'm going to call this temp underscore finger. And then let's go to the joint tool and redraw this finger here. And then I can grab that temp finger and delete it. Let's go ahead and rename our new finger. And this is the, if we're not sure, we can look. That's going to be our index. So it's going to be GM for Goatman underscore LT for left underscore index underscore JT for joint 01. Let's copy that. I'm going to expand this hierarchy here by holding shift and clicking that plus button, and we'll just paste this in and rename all these real quick. This next one, I'm going to go ahead and name this right off the bat. Let's just call it temp finger, because I know we're going to have to redraw it eventually. Let's turn our geometry back on. And because we used this, we more or less just took the previous finger and duplicated it, we could probably get this in place without a whole lot of work. So I'm going to rotate it down in Z a little bit. I'm going to look at these other joints and translate them in X until they line up with their corresponding knuckle. So let's grab this one and push it in X. And then our tip joint, again, we want to be just outside of our finger. And then I'm going to grab the top joint there, and I might rotate it in X to the right just a little bit. Again, so this Z axis, or this blue arc, again is matching or going in line with the angle of the finger there. And that should be good. Let's go ahead and take that temp finger and duplicate it. I'm going to push it over, and we'll leave it there for now. And then let's redraw this other finger. And let's see, let's grab that temp finger and delete it. And then let's rename our new one. So this is going to be my middle finger. So let's paste that in and call this middle. And we'll go through here and name this. Alright, let's turn the geometry back on. Let's grab our other temp finger here and snap it into place. So again, I'm going to hold the V key and left click and drag that joint to its knuckle, and then I'm going to push it inside and realign it, and then we will start rotating it into place. And so I'm going to start by rotating it in the y-axis. It looks like I could translate it in Z here, just to get it a little closer there to the center of the finger. And then, in terms of the angle of the finger, I'm going to rotate it in X, and again, just try to get the Z axis to be similar to the angle of the finger itself. So I'm going to push it to the left a little bit there. So rotating in X to the left. And again, you can see that X kind of matches that angle. Or I'm sorry, the Z matches this angle. And then it looks like I need to translate these joints. So I'm going to translate this one here to be in the center of its knuckle. And we'll just go through here and do all of these. I'm going to rotate this down in Z just to get the second knuckle in place. And then I might actually take this one and rotate it down in Z a little bit. And that should be good. Let's go ahead and take that finger and duplicate it. And I'm going to move the duplicate over. Let's turn off our geometry, and then let's redraw that finger we just put in. So I'm going to point snap to each one of these, a new joint, and then hit enter. Let's grab that template finger and delete it. Then let's take that new joint system and name it accordingly. So this is our ring finger. And this last one here is our pinky. Let's turn the geometry back on. Again, we'll just snap this into place. Then I'm going to rotate it in Y first to get that angle. I'm going to rotate it to the right in X, and again, I'm just trying to get this Z arc to line up with the angle of the finger. So again, I'm going to rotate to the right in X. I might angle that finger a little bit there in Y. That should be good. Now let's translate this. I'm going to push that joint inside that first knuckle there. And I'm going to grab the next one and translate it in X back to line up with its knuckle. And let's grab this one and do the same thing. And then this one will go back here to be the tip. And then I could grab this one, or the first knuckle, and rotate it down. And then I'm going to take the knuckle here, the center knuckle, and rotate it in Z a little bit there. And then I probably don't need that much rotation on the second, or the last knuckle here, the fingertip knuckle. So I'm going to rotate it up in Z a little bit. And that should be good. Let's turn off our geometry and let's redraw this finger. Let's grab the template and just delete it. And then let's name this one. So this is going to be our pinky. Oop. All right, we've got one finger left, and that's our thumb. So let's go ahead and get that in place. I'm going to go to the top view real quick and draw in a new joint chain. And this one only needs 3. So we'll have the first knuckle, the second knuckle, and the tip. We'll hit enter to finalize that. And then let's go back to perspective. And I'm going to snap this up to the hand. So I'm going to hold the V key and middle mouse or left click and drag from the center here. And drag that to some vertex up there in the hand. And then let's rotate this into place. And so I'm going to rotate it in Y first. And then I'm going to rotate it in X. And again, as I'm rotating in X, I'm watching the Z axis. And I want this Z axis to match sort of the angle of the finger itself. And so let's rotate this like so. And so you can see this X axis now kind of goes in the same line as this edge loop here through the center of the thumb. And then I'm going to rotate it in Y again just to match that angle a little bit better. And then I'm going to translate it in Z to get it a little more in the center of the finger here. I might push it back here. So let me take this first joint and in the X-axis push it back and inside the hand here a little more. And so we might have to re-rotate this once we get it in place. That's fine. And then let's take this and rotate it now. So I'm going to have to rotate it in Y again to match that angle. And then we can start rotating it down in Z to get it inside the other 2 joints inside the finger there. And then let's start grabbing these and pushing them in place. So I'm going to grab the second knuckle and we're going to make it match with its corresponding knuckle right there. And we'll grab the tip joint and we'll have it just outside the thumb like so. I'm going to grab this one and rotate it in Z just to get a slight bend on that thumb. And I might be able to pull that out in Y just a hair. And that should be good there. Let's go ahead and redraw it now. Actually, let me name it real quick. Temp thumb. And then let's redraw it. And then let's grab that temp thumb and delete it. let's grab the new joint chain we just put in and name it. So this is going to be thumb joint 01, 2, and tip. All right. I guess we just have the cup joints to do now. So I'm going to turn on Goatman's geometry. I'm going to grab the joint tool, and I'm just going to draw these onto the geometry itself, approximately where I would want them to be. So I'm going to hold the V key for point snapping, and I'm going to snap this one in. So this is our thumb. I'm going to snap it in somewhere right around in here to that vertice, and then hit enter. And then for the pinky, let's do the same thing. Let's grab the joint tool. I'm going to hold the V key and point snap it right to that vertice, and then hit enter to finalize that. And then let's just push these into place. So I'm going to have this inside the hand there. We want it kind of in the center of the hand and in that kind of meaty palm area. So I'm just going to pull that over a little bit. Same thing with this one. Let's push it inside the hand to be somewhat in the center. And that should be good. Let's go ahead and name those. So this is my, looks like my cup joint for the thumb. So let's call it Goatman underscore LT for left underscore thumb cup underscore JT for joint. Let's copy that and let's go to the next one. Paste that in and let's delete out the word thumb and name it pinky. All right, now we get to parent all that together. Let's turn off our geometry. And just like with the kid rig that we did, we will start by parenting the thumb and pinky to their respective cup joints. So I'm going to select the first joint for the pinky. I'm going to shift select the pinky cup joint and hit P to parent. I will then select the first thumb joint. I will shift select the thumb cup and then hit P to parent. And then both of those get parented to the wrist. So let's shift select both of those cup joints. And then I will shift select the wrist joint last. And then with all of those selected, I'll hit P to parent. And then with the finger joints, we'll select the first finger joint for every finger. With all three of those selected, I will shift select the hand joint last and hit P to parent. And that's all set up and ready to go. Now I may also want to check the local rotation axis just one more time on these. So I'm going to grab the wrist joint, I'm going to turn on the geometry, and then I will turn on component mode. And so we are going to have to fix these by hand. So what happened when I redrew these, the Y's are no longer facing in the correct direction. So we're going to have to go in and fix the local rotation axis of all the knuckle joints. It looks like for everything. So let's go ahead and just go through and do that real quick. So again, in terms of how your finger joints should work, the curling should happen on the Z's. So we want to be able to curl on our Z's. And in order to do that, we actually need the Y's to point outwards towards the center of every knuckle. So we want the Y's to face the top of the hand, and then we want the Z's to face to the left, going to the side of the finger. So let's do this first one here. I'm going to grab this first Y-axis. And in order to rotate this the way I need, I'm going to need to rotate it in the X-axis. So I'm going to rotate this in X. And as I rotate it in X, again, watch what the Y is doing. And I just need the Y, again, to point towards the top of the hand, towards the center of the knuckle. So we're only going to move these in X. We're not going to move them in any other axis. And so I've got that Y pointing out towards the top of that knuckle. And again, if you look at the Z, it's going towards the side of the finger. And so let's just go through and do the rest of these. Now your tip joints, you do not have to do this, just like with the feet and the head that we've already done. You could leave them completely alone since they don't control any deformation, but if you really wanted to, you could select the tip joint, go under skeleton, go to orient joint, and click on the options box, and just make sure orient joint to world is selected, and then hit apply. And then it'll orient it to the rest of the joint hierarchy, but then I'll still have to rotate it in X again until that Y is pointing towards the top of the finger itself. And so I'm going to go through and do this for the rest of them. So we'll grab that knuckle there, and let's rotate it in X again until it looks like that Y is pointing towards the top center of that knuckle. We'll rotate this one in X, and we'll just work our way through until we get all of these taken care of. All right, so again, yeah, once we get this done, if you take a look, you can see all those Y's are pointing towards the top of all their respective knuckles, and then my Z's are more or less pointing to the left. We'll need to do the same thing to the thumb here. So let's take this first thumb joint here, and I'm going to rotate it in X again until that Y is pointing towards the top part of the thumb. Now, if you notice with this thumb, it is angled at this kind of slight angle. So I do need to be mindful of that. And so as I'm doing this, I'm just making sure that Y is actually pointing towards the top of however that's angled. Let's grab this one and do the same thing. So I'm going to rotate it in X. And again, I'm going to point it towards that top center part of that knuckle. Like so. And let's grab our tip here and orient it. And then let's rotate it as well. Now our cup joints, they're going to be completely off. And so let's go back to the kid real quick to see how this should be oriented. I have a feeling what we need to do is with the Y's, they should point towards the top of the hand, and then the X's are going to face sort of the angle at which we want them to rotate at, but let's just double check that real quick. Let's go back to object mode. I'm going to go to the kid joint system over here and take a look at how his cup joints move. And so if we were to rotate this, again, it rotates in on X, which is what we would want. Let me grab that wrist and go into component mode and just look at the local rotation axis for these joints. So yeah, if you look there, the Y's are pointing up, the Z's are pointing left, and then the X's are angled at, again, sort of the axis that we want the rotation of the cupping motion. So we're going to have to build that in for Goatman over there. Let's go back to object mode real quick. Let's hide the kid. And let's come in here and grab Goatman's wrist and hop back into component mode. And I'm going to take this and let's see. So I need to rotate it down in Z. And again, I'm looking at that Y, and I just want it to point towards the top of the hand. And then I'm going to rotate it in Y, the Y-axis, and I'm looking at how the Z is angled, or if you actually look at the X-axis there, or the X local rotation axis, that little X icon there, I'm looking at how it's angled, and I want to kind of match this diagonal of the hand itself. So something like that, So we've got the Y again pointing up towards the top of the hand, and then that X. I can maybe point that X to the left just a hair. That should be good. And so again, I'm doing this looking at the local rotation axis. I'm not actually paying attention to the rotation tool. So this one I need to rotate down in Z. So I'm going to grab the Z axis here and rotate it. Again, until that Y axis is pointing up towards the top of my hand. And then I need that X axis to kind of match. So the local rotation axis, I need it to match the angle of that bone. So I'm going to rotate it in Y until it does. And then, yeah, if we look at just the local rotation axis now, let's deselect that. So you can see the Z is pointing to the left, the Y is pointing up towards the top of the hand, and then with this one, the X is actually pointed mostly down towards the this joint here. And then with the other palm, again, the Z is pointing left, and then the Y is pointing up towards the top of our, what would be our hand. So that should be good. Let's go back to object mode. We can just test this out real quick. I'm going to start by grabbing my fingers. Now, I'm going to select the first joint here, and then I'm going to work my way up. So I'm going to hold Shift and grab all of these. And if everything is oriented correctly, I should be able to grab the Z rotation. And if I rotate it in Z, I get a finger curl, like this. If I grab the Y rotation, I should get sort of a side-to-side motion for a finger spread. And then X is twist. So this is how we get a twist in our finger. So we could check all of these too if we wanted. So I'm going to shift select all the first joints in each finger, and then I'm going to go up the hierarchy here by holding Shift, and let's just grab all of these. And then again, if we rotate in Z, they should all curl in. Cool. And then again, if we grab Y, they should go side to side. Let's check our thumb now. So this one's going to be a little easier to see, I think, with our geometry up. So I'm going to shift select both thumb joints. And I'm going to curl it on Z. So that should curl in at an angle that matches our thumb. All right, so that looks good. And then our Y is going to be our thumb spread. So that's going to allow me to rotate my thumb towards the hand or away from it. So that's good. And then let's check our cup. So this should rotate that in on X for a cup. And then our pinky cup should do the same thing. This one I want maybe just a little bit more of an angle away from the hand. So I'm going to grab the local rotation axis for this one, and I'm going to grab the Y and actually rotate it so that the X is just pointing slightly away. And that should be good. Let's go back to object mode. And let's take a look. So that's all set up and ready to go. Let's move on to the last few joints we need here. So again, we're going to need a sternum, clavicle, and a shoulder weight joint. So I'm going to go to the front orthographic camera. Let me actually turn the geometry back on. Let's grab the joint tool, and again I'm going to hold the X key and left click and drag towards the center axis and then hit enter for our sternum. I'm going to do one more for the clavicle. And so the clavicle, Goatman's anatomy is a little more defined, and so I'm going to actually put that there because I can see his clavicle pretty well. I'm going to put it right there in that corner of the clavicle and then hit enter. And let's grab the shoulder weight joint, and then this one's going to go towards the top center part of the shoulder, somewhere right around in there. And we'll hit enter to finalize that. Let's go to our perspective. Now they're going to be way out here in front because we drew this from the front camera. So let's push these back. And then one at a time now, I'm going to realign these. Now this chest could probably go down a little bit, or the sternum, and then inside the chest. Clavicle, I'm just going to push it inside there. towards the front of the chest. And then this one's going to need to be in the center of the arm. Somewhere right around in there. Maybe even push it down a little bit. Let's go ahead and name those. So this is going to be GM underscore sternum underscore JT for joint. This is Goatman underscore LT for left underscore clavicle underscore JT for joint. And then this last one, let's go up here and copy the shoulder name here. So the left shoulder joint, let's copy that. And then on the shoulder weight, let's paste that in and just call this shoulder weight joint. Let's turn off the geometry and start parenting things. And so I'm going to grab the the shoulder joint first. I'll shift select the shoulder weight joint last and then hit P to parent. I will then select the shoulder weight joint first, shift select the clavicle joint last, and then hit P to parent. And then before we move any further, let's just grab that clavicle. Let's go up here to skeleton and do mirror joints. Click on the options box, and again, just make sure we're going from Y to Z, and we're searching for LT and replacing it with RT, and then hit apply. And then let's start grouping the rest of this stuff together, or parenting the rest of it together. So I'm going to shift select both clavicles, and then I'll grab the sternum last. I'll hit P to parent. And then just like what we did with the kid, we need that sternum to be parented to the highest spine joint. And let me see. Again, with Goatman, he's a little different, so let's see. So his highest spine joint is, I thought he has sixth one. There it is. So he's got spine joint 6, so I'm going to parent it to that one. So let's deselect that. Let's select the sternum first. I'll shift select spine joint 6 last, and then hit P to parent. And Goatman's all ready for controllers now. Make sure I can toggle that on and off. And so that's good to go. I'm going to go ahead and save again. We'll do an incremental. And I'm going to stop the video here.